Hello everyone. So today in this video I'll be explaining how the sugar, the carbohydrate molecule will be metabolized in the human body. So first is the ingestion and digestion. So ingestion meaning the consumption of the food. Once we have consumed a food which will be having a carbohydrate. So we have a sugars. When it comes to sugar, it is divided into monosaccharides, disaccharides, oligosaccharides, and then polysaccharides. So this division is based on the number of sugar molecule is present. So mono means one sugar molecule, di means two, and oligo means more than three, and polysaccharides means more than nine sugar molecule joins together to form a polysaccharide. So once we consume the food, the digestion begins in the mouth itself, because saliva which is present in mouth will be containing an enzyme called salivary amylase. So this salivary amylase will be breaking down the complex carbohydrates which is present in the food into disaccharides, into a very the simpler form. And once it reaches the small intestine, there disaccharides will be converted into monosaccharide, and that monosaccharide would be glucose mostly, mainly, and not any other sugar molecule like fructose. And this reaction is facilitated by the enzyme like sucrase and maltase. And once the glucose is being obtained, or next is the absorption into the bloodstream. So this glucose will be absorbed through the intestinal wall into the bloodstream. So we know that small intestine contains a hair-like projection called villi, and this villi is responsible for nutrient absorption. So glucose will also be absorbed in similar way like any other nutrient, and will be passed to the bloodstream, and through bloodstream it reaches organs and to the cells. So how it is transported? Through the sodium glucose transport proteins SGLT1 and GLUT2 channels. And next is the cellular uptake, meaning how the glucose will be taken up by the cells. So whenever there is a glucose molecule in the bloodstream, in response to it, pancreas will be releasing hormone. So when the blood sugar level is high, the pancreas releases insulin. When the blood sugar level is low, the pancreas releases glucagon. So in here, once we consume the food, the sugar level will be high. So the insulin will be produced. So what this insulin will do? So the insulin will be facilitating the glucose uptake into the cells, meaning it act as a chemical messengers. It tells the cells to take up the glucose. And how, especially when it comes to muscle and fat cells, GLUT4 channels are present in them, and once this channels opens, glucose will enter into the cell. So once glucose enters into the cell, the especially in the cytoplasm, a process called glycolysis will happen, where the once glucose entered into the cell, this glucose which contains 6 carbon. So here 6 carbon means 6C, and it will be converted into 2 pyruvate, which is 3 carbon compound, and 2 ATP molecule will be produced along with 2 NADH. So here ATP, which stands adenosine triphosphate. So ATP, it is an energy currency, and pyruvate molecule is a 3 carbon compound. So what is the purpose of this cycle? Why should it happen? So this should happen because it provides quick energy in the form of ATP, and also intermediates like pyruvate will also be produced through this cycle, which will be useful for the other cycles like the Krebs cycle and then electron transport chain, etc. And next comes the aerobic respiration. So aerobic means presence of oxygen, a process that happens in the presence of oxygen, and this happens in mitochondria. So the pyruvate
you can see the pyruvate which is obtained from the glycolysis process will be converted into acetyl CoA, and this acetyl CoA will be entering the Krebs cycle, and also it is the first compound in the Krebs cycle, and later the electron transport chain process comes in. And what is the yield that we get out of the cycle, meaning the how much ATP molecule or the energy currency is obtained. 36 ATP molecule is obtained per glucose molecule, and only, and this is only when there is a oxygen. If it happens in the absence of oxygen, meaning anaerobic condition, in this case the pyruvate from the glycolysis will be converted into lactate and not acetyl CoA. It will be converted into lactate. So when anaerobic condition will be happening, so when we are engaging in intense physical activity, for example weight training, during that time there will be a demand for oxygen because the heart is pumping so hard that it need more amount of oxygen, and hence there is a increased so that time the our body needs to produce energy ATP in the absence of oxygen. So during that time pyruvate to converts to lactate, but when it is anaerobic condition only 2 ATP per glucose molecule is produced, which is very less efficient. And next comes the storage and conversion. So once the glucose molecule has been used and energy is released, even after this process there are more excess glucose, then these glucose molecule will be stored as glycogen in the liver and muscles. And lipogenesis, when it does happen, if even the glycogen store is full, even the glucose which are remaining are stored as glycogen in liver and muscles, but still glucose is there, then in that case glucose will be converted into fat, and which will be stored in the adipose tissue. And next comes the gluconeogenesis. Let's say if a person is fasting, so in this case all the reserves, there is no food external source of carbohydrate, only the stored form of glucose which is glycogen will be used. And once the glycogen store is depleted, next the fat store will be used. And once the fats are also lipolysis also happen and still the energy is required, then in that case liver will be synthesizing glucose from a non-carbohydrate source. So what are non-carbohydrate source? The other than carbohydrate, it can be an amino acid or it can be a fat. And then next comes the regulation. So as I have discussed, when the blood glucose level is higher, insulin will be reduced. So when insulin produced, glucose will be taken up by the cells and the sugar level come to normal. Again, when the sugar level goes lower, during that time pancreas releases the glucagon, which will help in increasing, that is stabilizing the sugar level. So they perform a counterpart, they have a counter relay.